This is good. This really helps set the table for the 2026 season. It happened, I think, on Radio Row during Super Bowl week, but Fred Warner guaranteed that the 49ers would win the Super Bowl next season. Here's the quote. It was from the Pardon My Take podcast. It's only a matter of time. Next year, we're winning it. I guarantee it. Next year. The Super Bowl for the 2026 season is in February 2027 at SoFi Stadium. The parting image of this 2025 season was the Seattle Seahawks celebrating in the 49ers' own locker room. In fact, Seattle brought a Lombardi trophy to the Levi's Stadium home locker room before the 49ers did. Before that game on Sunday, Fred Warner, working for NBC, actually did a segment on live national television from right in front of his usual locker. It belonged to a relatively random Seahawks player. I even forgot his name. That gives you an idea of how much the 49ers locker room changed over the course of the Super Bowl. Fred said that it was like torture for him. And over the course of the week, I think a little bit before he was that NBC analyst, he said this. Now, the reason that I bring this up, I know that we've heard Diomede Lenore talking about winning the Super Bowl and all this and all that. Hearing it from Fred Warner, he's normally a bit more measured in what he says. And the fact that he was going around saying this, I think really reflects the season-ending vibes, which persisted even through the 49ers' shorthanded loss against the Seattle Seahawks in the divisional round. And, I'm going to go and I'm going to invoke a little bit of 49ers history here. 1983, they lost an NFC championship game to the Washington Redskins. Crazy game, by the way. It was at the old RFK Stadium. The 49ers were down 21-0 entering the fourth quarter in a day and age where it was harder to score points, right? Offense wasn't as robust as it is today. Joe Montana led 3 touchdown drives in that fourth quarter, and the 49ers defense got 3 stops, and San Francisco tied it up 21-21. But there were a couple very suspect holding calls on San Francisco's defense against Ronnie Lott in the end zone that allowed Washington to move into field goal range and kick the game winner as time expired. It was a devastating loss for the 49ers, but they weren't devastated for long. They actually exited that 1983 season feeling invigorated and ready to attack 1984. And we all know what happened in 1984. They lost only one time all season and ended up beating Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins in the Super Bowl. So there are 2 different ways to end your season, right? There's the way, especially in the postseason, when you make it all the way to the playoffs. You can take a massive gut punch in the playoffs and you're destabilized heading into the following season. That often happens to teams who lose Super Bowls. Or you can use the playoffs as a springboard into the next year. And I think that the 49ers are uniquely set up for the latter path based on how 2025 went. They showed such tremendous resilience in 2025. Again, I'll say this to the grave. There will never be another team as shorthanded as the 2025 49ers to win 13 games. It's never happened before, and I don't think it's ever going to happen again. What San Francisco showed was remarkable, and I will say that the vibes in that locker room, even after they lost by 35 points to the Seattle Seahawks in the divisional round, talking to Fred Warner, talking to other guys, there was not a vibe of devastation in that locker room. The 49ers understood that they had simply run out of ammo. I said at the time that there will only be 2 teams who leave this season feeling that they maximized it. The 49ers and the eventual Super Bowl champions. So fittingly, ironically, whichever way you want to put it, the 2 teams who have left this season feeling that they've maximized it are the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers, the 2 teams who used the home locker room at Levi's Stadium this season. The Rams are sick to their stomachs. The Patriots have to feel gut punched after how that ended, because they got knocked down a few pegs, even though they had a relatively healthy roster for that Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks. The Denver Broncos have to be feeling a whole heck of a lot of regret. They had the number 1 seed. They had New England coming in there, and they obviously didn't have Bo Nix, but they weren't able to win in the snowstorm. I saw some Denver people today saying that the chances of it being snowy in Denver in just the second half of that game, given the fact that they've had a mild winter with almost no snow otherwise, there's like a 2.246% chance of the snow hitting when it did. And it did, and the Broncos lost to the Patriots. Josh Allen and the Bills, that they're feeling so sick to their stomachs that they fired their coaching staff. Right? I mean, you look across the league, and it is set up for disappointment. Typically, 31 out of 32 teams are going to be disappointed. This year, only 30 of 32 teams were disappointed at the end of the season. The two outliers, the Seattle Seahawks and the 49ers, who absolutely maximized the hand that they were dealt. So the 49ers need to make sure that they can take this and apply it to a run in 2026, similar to how the 1983 team took that defeat to Washington and applied it to 1984. Those of you who are watching the Rise of the 49ers on AMC, it's really good. We were at the premiere a couple weeks ago, watched episode 2 last night. Actually, can't wait for episodes 3 and 4. I'll be taking you through it as it happens. But the past is often romanticized to the point where people don't acknowledge that even the dynastic 49ers had down years where they didn't win the Super Bowl, right? So in 82, the 49ers didn't even make the playoffs. That was the season after they beat the Cowboys and then the Bengals in Super Bowl 16. 82, they didn't even make the playoffs. They rebounded in 1983 to make it all the way to the NFC Championship game, despite some considerable adversity. And yeah, the refs might have screwed them in that championship game. They might have lost in devastating fashion, but they fought tooth and nail until the very end, evidenced by the fact that they erased that 21-0 deficit. And they carried that fight and they carried that vibe, that attitude over from 83 to 1984, where they finally broke through and won the Super Bowl. So you have to adopt some of those lessons and apply them to today. You're not going to win the Super Bowl every single season. You're not going to have the cards fall in your favor every single season. But you have to be able to capitalize and seize the opportunity when it does strike. And I could tell you, and Fred Warner can tell you, that the 49ers feel that opportunity is going to be here in 2026. Well, now we can go to the more logistical part of this. How can the 49ers end up getting this done moving forward? Because obviously they've got some players to see heal and they have some holes to patch up on their roster, just like every team does. And they're also playing in the best division in all of football. I think that the NFC West probably won't be quite as good as it was this year, because you're probably going to see some regression from both the Seahawks and the Rams. But it's the 49ers' job, in essence, to keep that divisional profile up, because if San Francisco can take strides forward as a football team, won't be easy to do since they already won 13 games this past year. But if they can take steps forward according to their plan, this is going to be year 2 after the big reset, then they can be the ones who win this division. It's all going to depend for the 49ers on continuing to fortify their A-list core with quality speed and physicality. How are you going to do that not only through the 2026 draft, but how are you going to continue developing the 2024 and 2025 draftees? And of course, the big overarching key for everything, and it shouldn't need to be said, but it does need to be said because staying healthy has been an issue for the 49ers, is keeping guys available. A lot of that could be bad luck. Some of it probably for San Francisco was the toll of having played all those 20-game seasons in 2022 and then in 2023. But that time has passed, and I know that they have a veteran core, an A-list core with quite a bit of mileage on it. But they're going to need to find a way to deliver a mostly available 2026 season in order to have a legitimate chance. Especially they have to be healthy down the stretch run so they have a legitimate chance heading into the postseason, because this year they just ran out of ammo. But as far as addressing some of the biggest weaknesses on this team, that's where the salary cap space comes in. That's where the draft capital comes in. I've got the 49ers at $57 million in salary cap space entering this offseason. Now, a lot of it is going to depend on exactly how big the salary cap is. We'll find out around the time of the NFL scouting combine, which is coming up in 2 weeks in Indianapolis before the start of the new league year in March. But I have my calculations right here, and I do these, I should probably explain how I get to these numbers, but the gist of it is that I do these on the basis of a 53-man roster and a projection for that roster. And as you'll see here right now, I have 40 players projected to make that 53-man roster. I've already accounted for what the practice squad will cost. I've accounted for the dead money that the 49ers will take on their books this year. And I realize that the 13 spots the 49ers have to fill will not come for free. You have to apply some simple logic here. If the 49ers fill all of the 13 remaining spots with veterans on minimum deals or with draft picks who will be also on similar sized contracts, it will cost about $13 million to complete the rest of the roster for the 49ers. So you have $57.2 million to start. You could subtract $13 million. That'd make $44 million for San Francisco to spend. But as always, it is not just a singular number. It's much more complicated than that. Of course, the 49ers aren't just going to sign minimum players and only add draft picks to the roster from here on out. They're also going to make some moves in free agency. Even last season, where they were relatively quiet in free agency, they did. So there's going to be more than $13 million taken out of this salary cap equation. Say that $25 million is taken out of it. Well, then all of a sudden you'd have $57 million minus 25. That would be $32 million of salary cap space left. The 49ers have always operated on a long-term salary cap principle, and they should, because they're trying to ride the salary cap accordion, the salary cap wave into the future. They're stretching out expenses. So they're going to want to carry between $30 and $40 million of unused salary cap space from 2026 into 2027. So if they spend $25 million in 2026 space to conduct free agency, even with backloaded deals and all this and all that, they'll be right at that $32 million threshold, which means that maybe we'll see some restructures. We'll see some more pushing of the cap down the road, because the 49ers understand that cap inflation is something that you can sustainably ride. It's them and the Philadelphia Eagles who have done the best job of this in recent years. So Nick Bosa, for example, that deal can probably be reworked. Trent Williams, that deal can probably be reworked. Signing bonus, option bonus, stuff converted into those types of bonuses, stretches out against the salary cap. You can surf the wave to the point of sustainability or insustainability, and it's hard to find exactly where that point is going to be, but the 49ers have generally done a good job earmarking it. The free agency period this year, which begins in March, will lead up into the draft and give us a real firm idea of how the 49ers are planning to push the chips into the middle of the table this season, because they always go for it. They were still top 5 in spending last year. I just think that the spending now is more likely to go to outside talent than it was to inside talent last year, when they redid contracts for Fred Warner, for George Kittle, for guys inside of the building. This time they can look more to the outside, because there are no A-list guys on the inside to re-up. So you fortified the foundation last year. Now you can add to that foundation, and then everything is going to set up for the NFL draft. I personally think there are two massive issues that were fatal to the offense in 2025. One was the lack of downfield separation from the wide receiver position, and the other was the lack of quality blocking on the perimeter, mainly from the wide receiver position. Those were the two biggest issues, and guess who was a culprit behind two of those problems? Guess whose disappearance would have helped both of those things? Yes, it is persona non grata in 49ers circles these days. It is this guy, Brandon Ayuk. They entered that season, 2025, thinking that they would get something from Brandon Ayuk. They paid Brandon Ayuk before 2024 began because he is this important to the football team. But look, the two shortcomings of that 49ers offense, I listed them both here. The poor perimeter blocking in the run game and the lack of downfield separation in the pass game. There's a reason why Brandon Ayuk was worth $30 million annually to them coming off that 2023 season, coming off of several good years for the 49ers. But he went MIA after they paid him. It created a massive void in 2025. The 49ers did not block well outside of their offensive line, and they did not separate well. They ranked number 24 in that regard at wide receiver. That severely compromised the explosiveness of this offense. Despite the fact that Brock Purdy's an MVP caliber player, they were not able to deliver number one offensive efficiency, especially against the big boys, because they didn't have the running backbone and they didn't have the downfield separation. It was especially true against the Seattle Seahawks, and that's a team that the 49ers will have to usurp in 2026 to make good on Fred Warner's promise of it's only a matter of time. Next year, we're winning it. I guarantee it next year. Piece of news from today, by the way. I just clicked on that, so we might as well get to this page. This is Keon White, Instagram post from the hospital after his surgery. He said, "Thank you to everyone who has reached out with their prayers and concerns on my behalf. I've undergone successful surgery. For those who know me, you all know this won't stop me from spreading peace and joy to the world. Full steam ahead. I'm in great spirits and ready to make the most of this offseason." For those of you who missed it, Keon White was shot in the ankle at 4:06 a.m. or around 4 a.m. Monday morning in the Mission District. He was at a nightlife establishment, and according to a San Francisco Police Department report following the incident, there was an altercation between Keon White's group. He was hosting a private party, and a group featuring the rapper Lil Baby. And according to the police report, Lil Baby and his crew wanted to get in on Keon White's party, and there was a dispute of some sort, and it led to Keon White being shot in the ankle. He underwent successful surgery in San Francisco, and that was the latest update that he posted on his page. And that leads me to the defensive side of the ball, where the 49ers obviously struggled last season following the injuries to Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. Also an injury to Mykel Williams. I mean, San Francisco was really, really good offensively throughout most of the season, especially when Brock Purdy was available in 2025. But they ultimately had those two fatal flaws, and we can trace those fatal flaws back to the defection of Brandon Ayuk. That hurt the 49ers. It screwed the 49ers in a big, big way. Defensively, it was the injuries that crippled this football team. Defensively, once Bosa went down, you had a gargantuan domino effect, a negative one on the pass rush. Once Fred Warner went down, the linebackers, especially in the scheme that Robert Saleh likes to run, became a massive liability. Eric Kendricks helped stop some of that bleeding, but Fred Warner is a transcendent player, a force multiplier, just like Bosa. Without Mykel Williams, the 49ers run defense eroded. When they had Mykel in there, it was easily a top 10 run defense. Without Mykel Williams, it was a bottom 6, bottom 7 run defense. They drafted him to set the edge and play the run and move inside. He tore his ACL halfway through the season, and the 49ers lost a ton. They've since also lost Robert Saleh. He has left to become the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. But the first major win of the 49ers this offseason was securing Raheem Morris to be their defensive coordinator. They're probably going to be able to evolve more easily defensively, and that has been needed with Morris at the helm. He's coached several different styles of fronts. Most recently, was working some 3-3-5 penny front stuff with Atlanta and blitzing a whole heck of a lot. I expect him to port some of that to the defense for San Francisco in 2026. A great example for you is that Upton Stout, 49ers rookie nickelback, generated more quarterback pressures than any other cornerback in football as a first-year guy in 2025. I think that Raheem Morris, coming off of a blitz rate that was second to only Brian Flores when he was coaching the Atlanta Falcons with Jeff Ulbrich this past year, is going to be able to incorporate some good stuff for Upton Stout. Look at the Super Bowl. Look at Drake May and how much he struggled in this game. The Seahawks might have dominated with their front four, but it wasn't just that for Seattle. They blitzed their cornerback, Devin Witherspoon, twice early on, and I thought that it completely threw Drake May off. I mean, those were two sniper blitzes put in there by Mike McDonald, and I think that Raheem Morris is going to have the capability of adding very well-timed blitzes for the 49ers, especially with a weapon like Upton Stout in 2026 to bolster what the 49ers are going to have in Fred Warner's return, Nick Bosa's return, and in Mykel Williams' return. You're also going to have some more development from CJ West and Alfred Collins, who both had fine rookie seasons. Those are the 49ers run stoppers. Speaking of run defense, take a look at this. This is where Seattle was transcendent, and this is where the 49ers absolutely need to get better. So overall rushing success rate allowed is on the x-axis. So you want to be further to the right because it's a lower percentage of success rate allowed. Success rate is the percentage of plays that yield a positive result. The specific success in nickel and dime packages against the run, when you're taking at least one heavier linebacker who is supposedly there to bring you success against the run, when you're taking him off of the field, that is on the y-axis. Look at where Seattle is as a defense. Upper right. This is insane. The Seahawks had the best run defense overall in the league. That's why they're further to the right. But look how good they were stopping the run out of nickel and dime packages. That's a key. That's a key because if you can stop the run, even when you're taking one or two linebackers off the field and you're replacing them with defensive backs, you're going to be better against the pass. Look who else was good at that. The Chicago Bears. They led the league in takeaways this year. The Chicago Bears were able to keep nickel and dime personnel on the field because they were solid at stopping the run with it. And because of that, they upped their chances to get some takeaways. The Seahawks were absolutely elite. This was a historically good defense for Seattle. The 49ers, meanwhile, really struggled. Look at that. Wasn't good for San Francisco. Was not good. Allowed way too high of an overall rushing success rate. And you want to be in the upper right here, and they were in that upper left-hand quadrant, but just way too far to the left to the point where they were not doing anything particularly well. Maybe a little bit above average in one of these regards, but the loss of the personnel that the 49ers sustained this year would not lead me to believe that they would be in a good spot in a graph like this. But I think the future of the NFL, the future of good defensive football is being able to succeed against the run defensively, even if you're running nickel and dime packages out there, because you have to stay ready against some of these adaptable offenses. So we will all wait with bated breath to see what San Francisco can bring defensively. You know, one thing that this is a related note, side note, but a related one. The Seattle Seahawks are going to be tested when it comes to the historical struggle to port elite defense from season to season. And I think the Seahawks might be relying on that in 2026. So historically, it's been a lot easier to count on an offense that's a top 5 or top 3 or top 2 offense staying that good the next year, probably because there are fewer variables, right? Play caller, quarterback, receivers who can gain separation. Maybe that's what's really important as far as porting offensive success. That has been easier to predict year over year. Teams that are defensively rooted, like the Seahawks, who are the top defense in football this year, they have struggled to keep things elite the next season. Now, if there is a team that can do it, it's probably a Mike McDonald coach team. That's how good he is as a defensive mastermind for Seattle. And you're going to see a lot of teams emulating the Seattle style of defense. And then you look at something like this and you're like, holy crap, Seattle was an outlier. They were really good. There's a team that can do it. It is Seattle, but there's a lot of pressure on Seattle's defense to be able to maintain the raging play that they had on the defensive side of the ball, because they are losing their offensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak is no longer going to be there. He just took the head coaching job of the Raiders. And the knock on defensive head coaches had been that, okay, when they lose their offensive play caller, that's a tremendous amount of continuity to lose on the offensive side of the ball. So the Seahawks get to keep their head coach, who's their defensive play caller, and maybe the medicine to this erosion that we've seen of elite defenses year after year. But the offense, which was pretty damn good by then, they didn't turn the ball over a single time in the postseason. They really hit their stride with Sam Darnold, Kenneth Walker, and company. They're going to have to overcome the loss of the leader in Clint Kubiak there. Will the Seahawks be able to do it? Will they also be able to keep up the top-level special teams play? That's TBD heading into this 2026 season. But it's going to be a challenge for a team coming off of that Super Bowl win for sure. Meanwhile, the 49ers, well, they would love to not repeat the defensive performance of 2025. They would love to get healthy, show that they can be a top 5 defense. It looked like they might be on track for that before Nick Bosa and Fred Warner got hurt early in the 2025 season. Now they're going to have Raheem Morris to bring them some more defensive adaptability. They'll have Upton Stout blossoming into a second-year player. I think free agency is going to be tremendously important for the 49ers defense, because I think they want to really upgrade that safety position. Maybe even upgrade linebacker. We'll see what Morris has in mind. If he's running more 5-1 penny fronts, linebacker might be actually de-emphasized in importance, and DB might be emphasized in importance relative to what it was in a more Saleh-like system. It's all going to be a fascinating evolution for the 49ers, but they definitely have some horses returning from injured reserve in 2025 in Bosa, Warner, and Michael Williams that can raise this defensive profile. On the offensive side of the ball, I'm most curious to see if the 49ers try to solve the separation issue by pursuing a very high up A-list receiver. That's why everybody talks about a Justin Jefferson trade or an Alec Pierce free agent signing, or if they go to second tier free agency for somebody like Romeo Doubs, who can also block. I love him as a prospect. And then also turn to the NFL draft. The 49ers aren't going to be picking all too high in the NFL draft. They're going to be in the 20s this year. Casey Concepcion is the receiver that Mike and I are keeping an eye out for, somebody who might be available later in the first round. He reminds Mike a lot of Brandon Ayuk as far as somebody who can play the X and be physical downfield. And I think that he likes some of his springy movement, catch radius kind of stuff. So maybe the 49ers hit on receiver in both second-rate free agency or second-tier free agency and with their first-round draft pick, because, again, the two biggest issues for this football team last season offensively were clearly linked back to Brandon Ayuk, who defected from the football team, and the 49ers will be trying to make up for that. Now, the good news is that when you go to the salary cap situation, 49ers still stand to gain even more space because of Brandon Ayuk's defection. He could have actually made this way harder on the 49ers. He could have, just faked his way through injury rehab and been able to make a ton of money up to his injury guarantees. But the fact that he stopped showing up will allow the 49ers to not pay out an option bonus for 2026. Will allow the 49ers maybe to even recoup some of the signing bonus that they paid out to Brandon Ayuk in 2024, and maybe even increase that available amount of money, which currently sits at $57 million. They've already conducted their first pieces of offseason business, and that is tender their exclusive rights free agents. Not too many of them projected to make the 53-man roster. The restricted free agent business is going to be coming next for San Francisco, followed by the unrestricted free agent stuff. One thing that is going to be mandatory, I think, is re-signing who you had on special teams last year. Eddie Pinheiro, at kicker, Thomas Morstead at punter, and John Weeks at long snapper. That's all going to be very, very important for the 49ers because they were good on special teams this year. They would like to remain that way. I really think that having two dominant phases of the game plus one good one that's not screwing it up is enough. And, you know, the Seahawks were a definite embodiment of that. They had the number one defense, number one special teams, number two by one of the metrics, but I think they were the best in football. And about the number 9 or number 10 offense, that's good enough, right? Offense firmly above average in the top 10, two elite components to the football. Boom, you're ready to go. Seahawks win the Super Bowl in dominant fashion. The 49ers in 2023 had an elite offense, a number 9 or number 10 defense. So it wasn't dominant, but it was good. But then a special teams unit that was ranked at the bottom of the league, and that ruined it in the Super Bowl for the 49ers. So I think you got to come out in 2026 with the mentality of, okay, let's make sure that you keep the special teams at the top. And the 49ers were number 2 behind only Seattle in terms of special teams in 2025. Work that offense into the top 5 for the entire season, not just for parts of the season. And that's going to require health. And then make sure that the defense is able to rise out of the bottom quartile of the league. Here you have it visualized. The Seahawks were number 9 offense, number 1 defense, and number 2 special teams. So they had 2 elite components in defense and special teams and a good one in offense. The 49ers have very, very full capability, especially if they play this offseason acquisition process right, of being an elite top 5 offense. They already were the number 2 special teams by the EPA metrics this season. So you keep that where it is under Brant Boyer. Then you just can't have the defense bringing up the rear at number 26 if you're the 49ers. You got to bring that defense into the top 15. I think if they can take the offense into the top 5, and with Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, that is very, very possible. There are even rumblings of George Kittle being back by week 1. But bring that offense into the top 5, keep that special teams in the top 5, and then if you can move that defense into the top 15, you are a contender if you are the 49ers. I think analytically that is the most simple pathway for San Francisco. Here is KC Concepcion. We've got a little bit of a good graphic here to illustrate his body type and what he brings to the field. Mike loves KC Concepcion coming out of Texas A&M. He thinks that he's going to be there for the 49ers toward the end of the first round. And here are some of the metrics for him. 5'11", 190. He's 21 years old. His breakout age was 19. And, you know, Ricky Pearsall entered the league older. Ricky Pearsall's already in his mid-20s for the 49ers. He's only been in the league for a couple seasons. So there could be some value in this draft pick for San Francisco. Mike says that breakout age is very important. I guess it's correlated to draft success, and Pearsall's was higher. Not to say that Ricky Pearsall can't have a big 2026 season. I think the 49ers are relying on it, but I think that somebody like KC Concepcion is fitting that metric much, much better for San Francisco. Top of the show, we mentioned what Fred Warner said. It's only a matter of time. He guarantees that the 49ers are winning the Super Bowl. I think I just outlined the preliminary formula for the 49ers to be able to do that. Hit the subscribe button. We've hit 100,000. It is off to the moon now as far as that goes. Time for me to go eat. I'll talk to you guys very, very soon.